That night, I learned how loud silence could become. The house was always quiet after 11, the kind of quiet that felt staged, as if the walls were holding their breath. Marianne Cole liked things orderly, lights off, dishes dried, doors locked in precise sequence. Derek Cole liked control even more. He moved through our home like he owned not only the furniture but the air itself. That I was 19, technically an adult, but inside that house I felt smaller than I had at 9. That I had fallen asleep with my headphones on, a sketchbook open beside me, charcoal smudged across my fingers. Drawing was the only way I could put shape to feelings I didn't dare name. Lately, those feelings had been shifting, softening when I thought about certain smiles at school, tightening when Derek's footsteps paused outside my door. That night, I woke to the sound of my bedroom door clicking shut. At first, I thought I had imagined it. I stayed still, eyes closed, hoping whoever stood there would believe I was asleep. The air felt heavier, saturated with something unspoken. I recognized Derek's cologne before I heard him breathe. It was the same sharp scent he wore to church, to neighborhood barbecues, to anywhere he needed to appear respectable. That I won't describe everything that followed. I remember confusion more than anything, an icy paralysis that spread from my chest outward. I remember wanting to move but not knowing how. I remember the overwhelming awareness that a boundary had dissolved, and with it, something fundamental inside me. When the door finally opened again and the hallway light slipped under the frame, I didn't move for a long time. In the morning, Marianne stood at the stove flipping pancakes, humming softly as if nothing in the world had shifted. Derek sat at the table scrolling through his phone, his expression calm, almost bored. He looked up when I entered, and our eyes locked for half a second too long. There was no apology in his gaze. "Only warning, you look tired, Elliot," Marianne said without turning around. "I didn't sleep well," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. Derek folded his newspaper and smiled faintly. "College application stressing you out?" His tone was casual, but it carried a message beneath it. "Stay quiet." That I nodded and took my seat. Every bite of food felt like swallowing gravel. I wanted to tell Marianne something, anything, but she had perfected the art of selective blindness. She saw what kept the peace. She ignored what threatened it. Derek reached for the syrup and let his hand brush mine deliberately. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten. When I pulled back, he raised an eyebrow as if daring me to react. That was the moment I understood the real danger wasn't just what had happened. It was how easily he could pretend it hadn't. For weeks afterward, Derek behaved exactly as he always had, authoritative, attentive in public, critical in private. If anything, he was kinder when Marianne was watching. He asked about my grades. He commented on my artwork. He even offered to help me fix a loose hinge on my closet door, but when we were alone, his words shifted. "You've always been a sensitive kid, Elliot," he told me one evening while Marianne was at the grocery store. "Sometimes people imagine things when they're confused." I didn't answer. He leaned against the kitchen counter, studying me with calculated patience. "You're at that age where you're figuring yourself out. Feelings can get tangled." There it was, the subtle suggestion that whatever had happened was my fault, a symptom of some flaw in me. I retreated to my room, shutting the door more forcefully than necessary. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, eyes sharper, shoulders tense. I felt like I was carrying a secret that grew heavier each day. School became my refuge. That's where I met Adrian Mercer. He sat 2 rows behind me in art history, tapping his pen rhythmically against his notebook while the professor lectured about Renaissance symbolism. I noticed him because he wasn't pretending to listen. He was sketching something in the margins, bold lines, confident strokes. After class, he caught up to me in the hallway. "You're Elliot, right?" he asked, adjusting the strap of his messenger bag. His voice was warm, steady. "Yeah. I saw your charcoal piece in the student gallery. The one with the fractured mirror." He smiled slightly. It felt honest. No one had ever described my work that way. "Thanks," I said, unsure how to respond to praise that wasn't laced with critique. We started walking together after that. At first, our conversations stayed safe, assignments, professors, favorite artists. But Adrian had a way of asking questions that lingered. "What made you draw that?" he asked one afternoon, referencing the broken mirror. I hesitated. Sometimes it's easier to draw something cracked than to explain why it is. He didn't push further. He just nodded, as if he understood more than I'd said. Being around Adrian felt different from anything I'd known. My chest tightened when he laughed. I found myself noticing the way sunlight caught in his hair, the way he listened without interrupting. The feelings I'd been trying to suppress began to surface, undeniable and frightening. At home, Derek noticed the change before Marianne did. "You've been out late," he commented one evening as I slipped off my shoes by the door. "Study group." "With who?" "Classmates." His gaze sharpened. "Boys or girls?" The question hung between us. "Loaded, both," I answered carefully. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't want to complicate your life, Elliot. People talk. They misunderstand." It wasn't concern. It was control disguised as guidance. Upstairs, I texted Adrian for the first time outside of class hours. Just a simple message: "Thanks for walking with me today." He replied almost instantly. "Anytime. You don't have to walk alone, you know." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. At dinner that night, Marianne chatted about a charity event at church. Derek contributed politely, nodding at appropriate moments. I watched them from across the table, struck by how convincing their marriage looked from the outside. Later, as I passed the living room, Derek's phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message preview lit up the screen, just a name and a heart emoji. It wasn't Marianne's name. I looked away quickly, but the image stayed with me. The hypocrisy was almost laughable. The man who warned me about complicating my life was hiding complications of his own. That realization didn't bring comfort, but it shifted something inside me. Derek wasn't untouchable. He wasn't morally superior. He was afraid of exposure too. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything: the door clicking shut, Adrian's gentle smile, the message on Derek's phone. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. There was anger now, and beneath that anger, a fragile thread of courage. When my phone vibrated on the nightstand, I reached for it instinctively. It was Adrian. "You okay?" The message read. "You seemed far away today." I typed and erased 3 different responses before settling on the truth I could manage. "Just thinking a lot." His reply came seconds later. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I set the phone down, heart pounding, not from dread this time, but from possibility. For the first time since that night, I considered what it might mean to speak instead of stay silent. And somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. The creak in the hallway faded, but Elliot Vaughn did not sleep. He lay still, counting his breaths, waiting for the familiar pause outside his door. None came. After several minutes, he heard Derek Cole's footsteps retreat toward the master bedroom, measured and unhurried. The performance of normalcy would continue in the morning, but something inside Elliot had shifted. Fear had once kept him quiet, now it sharpened his awareness. The next afternoon, Adrian Mercer found him in the campus courtyard, sketchbook balanced on his knee, though he hadn't drawn a single line. "You look like you're planning a revolution," Adrian said lightly as he sat beside him. Elliot managed a faint smile. "Maybe I am." Adrian studied him, expression softening. "Did something happen?" The question lingered between them. Elliot felt the familiar instinct to deflect, to protect everyone except himself. Yet Adrian's patience felt different from interrogation. It felt like space. "Things at home are complicated," Elliot said carefully. Adrian didn't press for details. Instead, he nodded once. "Complicated doesn't mean permanent." The word settled deep. Elliot realized he had been treating his situation like a life sentence rather than a circumstance. Over the following days, he began noticing patterns he had previously tried to ignore. Derek's scrutiny intensified whenever Elliot mentioned Adrian's name. Casual questions carried barbed undertones. "That Mercer kid," Derek said one evening while drying dishes. "He seems invested in you." "We're friends," Elliot replied evenly. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Friendship can blur lines." The hypocrisy was suffocating. 2 nights later, Elliot passed through the living room again and saw Derek's phone illuminate with another message. This time, curiosity overpowered hesitation. Derek was in the shower. Marianne had fallen asleep with the television humming softly. Elliot didn't unlock the phone, he didn't need to. The preview alone told enough. The sender's name, Vanessa R. appeared above a string of intimate emojis and the words, "Miss last night already." The confirmation landed like a stone in his chest. Derek wasn't just manipulative. He was unfaithful. The man who guarded Elliot's behavior so fiercely was betraying Marianne with calculated ease. For a brief moment, Elliot felt vindicated. Then he felt furious, not only at Derek's deception but at the irony of it. Derek had weaponized morality to maintain control, all while violating the very vows he pretended to defend. The next morning, Elliot's perspective had changed. He watched Derek at breakfast, noting the effortless charm, the casual kiss pressed to Marianne's temple. It was a performance, and Elliot could see the seams now at school. Adrian noticed the difference immediately. "You're standing taller," Adrian observed as they left class. "I'm just tired of shrinking," Elliot replied. They walked farther than usual that afternoon, beyond the campus gates to a quiet park edged with winterbear trees. The air was cold enough to sting, but Elliot felt steady. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, voice low but unwavering. Adrian stopped walking. "Okay." Elliot struggled for precise language. He refused to relive details that still made his pulse race, but he would not minimize the truth either. "Someone crossed a boundary with me," he said finally. "Someone who shouldn't have." Adrian's expression shifted, not to shock, but to concern grounded in belief. "Elliot, was it recent?" Elliot nodded. "And ongoing, in smaller ways." Adrian didn't ask for proof. He didn't question Elliot's interpretation. He simply stepped closer, careful and deliberate. "I believe you," Adrian said. The simplicity of those words unraveled something knotted inside Elliot. He hadn't realized how desperately he needed validation until it was given without hesitation. "I thought maybe I was overreacting," Elliot admitted. "He keeps implying I'm confused." "You're not confused," Adrian replied firmly. "You're being manipulated." Hearing it spoken aloud transformed doubt into clarity. That evening, Elliot returned home with a new resolve. He no longer felt like prey navigating a predator's territory. He felt observant, strategic. Derek was in the study when Elliot knocked lightly on the open doorframe. "Yes?" Derek asked, not looking up from his laptop. "I know about Vanessa," Elliot said calmly. The typing stopped. Derek lifted his gaze slowly, assessing. "Excuse me?" "I've seen the messages." For a fraction of a second, Derek's composure faltered. Then he recovered, leaning back in his chair. "You shouldn't snoop." "I didn't have to," Elliot replied. "You're not as careful as you think." The silence that followed was dense. "You don't understand adult relationships," Derek said finally, tone measured. "Marriage is complicated." "Is that what you call it?" Elliot asked. "Complicated?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Elliot." The warning was familiar, but it no longer paralyzed him. "You told me not to complicate my life," Elliot continued. "Maybe you should take your own advice." For the first time, Derek seemed unsure of his footing. Elliot recognized the shift in power, not complete, but tangible. "I don't know what you think you're implying," Derek said quietly, "but accusations can backfire." "I'm not accusing," Elliot replied. "I'm observing." He held Derek's gaze steadily before turning and leaving the room. His heart pounded, but it wasn't from fear. It was from reclaiming space. Later that night, Marianne confronted Derek in hushed but urgent tones behind their closed bedroom door. Elliot couldn't hear every word, but he caught fragments, messages. "Explain, how long?" The carefully curated piece was fracturing. When Derek emerged an hour later, his expression was tight. He stopped outside Elliot's door but didn't enter. "This isn't over," Derek said through the wood. Elliot sat upright in bed, pulse steady. "No," he replied softly. "It's not." The next day, Adrian met him with searching eyes. "You told him?" Adrian asked. "I did." "And?" "He's rattled." Adrian exhaled slowly. "Good." Elliot realized something profound in that moment. Derek's power had always depended on silence. The second Elliot began to speak, even partially, that power weakened, but he also knew confrontation alone wouldn't resolve everything. Marianne deserved the full truth, not fragments shaped by convenience. And Elliot deserved freedom, not just from Derek's manipulation, but from the house itself. I can't stay there much longer, Elliot admitted. Adrian didn't hesitate. You won't have to face it alone. The certainty in his voice steadied Elliot more than any plan could. That evening, Elliot began packing small, essential things into a duffel bag, not to run impulsively, but to prepare deliberately. Sketchbooks. Identification. A change of clothes. Evidence, if necessary. Downstairs, another argument simmered. The illusion of perfection was collapsing, and Derek could no longer control every narrative thread. As Elliot zipped the bag closed, his phone vibrated. A message from Adrian, proud of you. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it. Elliot looked around his room, the walls that had witnessed his silence, the door that had once felt like a barrier he couldn't defend, now it felt like an exit, and as voices rose sharply below, Elliot understood that the real confrontation was still coming, but this time, he wouldn't be alone.